let's talk about Aaron Rodgers, because you and I have talked about him on the show a few times, in these
Have
past
we? I don't
few
recall.
months.
Yeah,
Because it was before I went away, so it was about a month ago, right?
sure.
Where there was all of this, what's Aaron Rodgers going to do when he's still in play for the Giants and the Vikings? And we didn't hear diddly squat from Aaron Rodgers. There was nothing. And I brought up the potential that maybe this is kind of just a media narrative that's getting pushed, right? Because we don't know what Aaron Rodgers, like, he hasn't said a word, right? So, like, you got people taking pictures of him standing on a beach, looking melancholy. But maybe that this is just a fabricated thing, and this just kind of get some clicks before the draft. And then he goes on McAfee yesterday, and there is already this assumption, and our expectations were too high, that something was going to be said.
Yeah.
Right? Then we're talking about, like, there was the our expectations that something, like, we were going to learn a piece of information. That's on us.
Oh, so stupid.
You like, there was a graphic that you were like, this kind of looks like a retirement graphic, because they were hyping it up of like, look at all of his accolades and all this. And he gets on the show, and basically nothing is really confirmed for Aaron Rodgers. He goes, I'm open to everything, attached to nothing. Dolphins are in the Bay. The Jets suck, and Aaron Glenn hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that. But it was at that point where I was like, okay, this one I'm going to put on you, Aaron, because he did say some things, and I want to kind of be careful here, because listening to Aaron Rodgers for years, this is something that will happen. He went on McAfee yesterday, and he was explaining that there were like some personal things going on, like with his inner circle. And so I do want to be like sensitive, because like maybe somebody's sick, or somebody's like going through like a tragedy or something like that. And I want to be cognizant of that. However, I do think going on the Pat McAfee show and not really saying, like, it could have been an email, right? Like, it could have been a, hey, haven't made a decision yet, open to anything. That's it, right?
Yeah.
But instead, it was that happened, and then it was, let's crap all over the Jets, which was great, because then old tweets started coming up saying, like, a face-to-face meeting is always better than a phone call, which is phenomenal.
So good.
Because Aaron Rodgers basically complained that he flew over to New Jersey on his dime, and he told the pilot, I know. When he
could you afford it on your own dime, Aaron?
I'm sorry, was sitting there watching that, when he goes, like, I'll play for like an easy 10 mil. And I'm just like, that would be my retirement, and I would never have to work a day in my life. He's like, guys, I'm not asking for much. It's just 10 mil. That's fine.
And honestly, what bothered me even more about that is that he said 10 M's.
Yeah, he did say 10
I'd play for 10 M's.
Yep.
You know who says shit like 10 M's? Guys who've already made $100 million fucking dollars.
It's fair.
10 M's.
I'm just a little 10 M's.
I'd play for 10 M's.
Yeah,
and that's
10
good. Like, you're not worth like a giant contract. You're worth probably more than 10 M's as a quarterback.
Sure.
To be fair. But yeah.
Get out of here, Todd. Get out of here.
It was incredibly annoying.
But he flew, real quick. So context.
So he flew.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So he flew over to New Jersey on his dime. He made sure that people knew that. And basically he told his pilot, hey, go back and swing a couple beers. This is going to be a few hours. Maybe we'll go out and get some dinner, the whole 9 yards. And by the way that this story is being told, if you've ever watched The Office, when Michael goes in and like winds up quitting from Dunder Mifflin, right? And he's telling the story, and it's the worst story ever told. And he's like, turns out I wasn't even in the right building.
Yeah.
That's how this story was being told. But basically, he goes in there, and he's sitting there with Aaron Glenn, of course, the former defensive coordinator from the Detroit Lions. And he goes, he's in there for a second. He runs out of the room. He brings the GM back in and goes, so you want to play football? And he's like, yeah. And then he goes, well, we're going in a different direction at QB. And
I hope to God that's what Aaron Glenn did. If Aaron Glenn did it just like that, he will have my respect for eternity. For eternity.
Yeah. Hey,
but I have a hard time believing that's exactly how it went down for some reason.
But regardless, he then was very upset because Rodgers like, you could have just called me and told me that we were moving on. I thought you wanted to pick my brain about the team, what have you. And now and he goes, the GM called me later and he basically was crapping on Aaron Glenn and was saying, it wasn't professional and it wasn't like all this stuff. And I just found it interesting because I do not doubt that Aaron Glenn probably was like, we don't want this. And I wouldn't even be surprised if the GM was like, we don't want this either, but I don't want to look like the bad guy. And Aaron Glenn is like, I was with the Detroit Lions. I will happily be a bad guy to Aaron Rodgers. And just go in and be like, yeah, we don't want you there, buddy. And it just, the way that it was told just came off of very like, and I was like, okay. And then he's like, we've spoken to a lot of teams. But then when McAfee was like, well, which teams? He's like, well, I'm not going to get into specifics, but I talked to Brian Dable and I talked to KOC. So, and of course he's had a lot of communication with the Steelers. I can't imagine there's been a ton of teams that have reached out. I don't think that is the case. I think that he probably did talk to KOC at some point, right? Because they have a relationship. Probably talked to Brian Dable at some point. And McAfee at one point asked a question directly saying, if you're going to play football, is it likely going to be for the Pittsburgh Steelers? And he didn't close that door. They talked about working out with DK Metcalf. So at the end of it, we didn't really learn anything except that Aaron Rodgers hates Aaron Glenn and he's willing to play for $10 million. Someone go sign him.
Yeah, and he hates our time. He really has no respect for our time at all.
It's true.
He contradicts
silver, though.
half of what he says almost immediately, which is hilarious. And what I learned about Aaron Rodgers is, because I went into watching that interview not thinking I was going to make like a video about Aaron Rodgers and how annoying he is in interviews. But I thought, okay, I'm going to make a video about him announcing he's retiring.
Sure.
Or that he, even if he doesn't say he's going to the Steelers, that he's committed to playing football this year. Like, I can make a video about that. What I learned was he had no intention of clearing any of that up for us.
Yeah.
Also, I say that to say I went in that with like an open chakra, if you will. My heart was open to Aaron Rodgers. I didn't want to be a hater after watching that interview.
Sure.
And I think you need to say that because a lot of times people have angles before they go into shit. I just wanted to make a good video. Had no choice but to be like, this is bullshit. It really is bullshit. But what Rodgers is to me is somebody who I think you can have a lot of fun talking to, as long as you're not talking about anything that relates to him seriously. You wanna joke with Aaron Rodgers about shit. Him just talking about like other guys like DK Metcalf, like hyping them up, Ashton Genty. There was a lot of fun moments in those conversations. I don't think Aaron Rodgers takes like the world around him too seriously. That's where you're like, oh, he's a normal guy, a little snarky, you can have fun with. If it's anything about him where there might be any sort of criticism about Aaron Rodgers, he turns into a different fucking person, like almost instantly. Fun guy, insufferable guy. Fun guy, insufferable guy. Like those are the two lines you walk with Aaron Rodgers in the course of a single conversation. And I thought Pat McAfee, I think their show does a pretty good job talking to guys like Rodgers. They had a great conversation with LeBron James, even though LeBron James was just there to talk shit about Stephen A. Smith. Aaron Rodgers was just there to talk shit about the Jets, and that was hilarious, even if I think he's wrong in the situation. And I think McAfee does a good job of navigating a decent interview and conversation while filleting Rodgers just a little bit to keep him engaged along the way. And the guys, on Pat's show, they have good questions that are a little more fun, a little less serious, and they keep like the overall tone of the whole interview like pretty good. But like, fuck, man, if you say you're gonna clear it up for us, and then you just go on these diatribes about all of this stuff that's not actually relevant to you making a decision, that's annoying. And again, what he did is he set this bar that makes it hard to criticize what he said on there, because he prefaced it like every 5 minutes with his inner circle and there's stuff going on there.
Sure.
And it almost feels like he's trying to set us up for later down the road of how serious something's going on.
That's what I'm saying.
It back in our face.
Correct. Literally. That is why I'm like, I want to be like sensitive, but this is
like,
also...
oh, you criticized me for my mother's dying. Like it's like that level of like he's ready for it.
So yeah, that's why I'm like, I want to be careful here because I just want to like, again, the clearing up, and this is the problem too. Like, the expectations are being set, right?
Yeah.
When McAfee announced that Rodgers was coming on, huge spike in the ratings, like huge, like people are interested and be like,
he
this
knows
is
why
it.
we're there to watch him too.
Correct.
That's what's infuriating.
So it's, again, if you're there to clear it up, and I was even after all these Aaron Rodgers watches, I was like, maybe, just maybe, similar thing, like maybe he's just going to retire. We haven't heard anything from, but nope. And that still might wind up being.
It might happen, but he might not know yet, and that's fair to him. Like,
that's very fair.
I'm like going through like business stuff on my end where I'm unsure about a lot of things, and I understand how hard it is to like make some of these big decisions.
Yeah.
And I think we'd be fair about like, hey, I don't know if I want to play. I don't know if I want to retire. I get that. I really do. Rodgers isn't currently good enough to drag this shit out. 4 teams to wait for him, right? Like, it's not like the Steelers or whoever's like, man, if we get Rodgers, we are actually a contender. He's not at that level anymore.
Not there right now.
We watched it last year. There was an injury the year before. There can be more injuries going forward. Like, that's the other part of it. It feels like he doesn't realize that part of it. And when he's telling that Jets story, and he was like, their whole point was like, they wanted to talk about the messaging of how I exit, the Jets. And I told them I don't give a shit about the messaging.
Yeah.
But then he goes on McAfee to tell us how everybody reporting on him is wrong and all the messaging is incorrect.
Yep.
They asked you, how do we want it? Fuck you. That's what he told them. I don't care.